Cool. Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Neo4j online meetup. So you just got me today. Karina's busy at the Strata conference in San Francisco. So I get to do Karina's bit. So welcome again. If this is the first time joining us, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have a bit of code and things to view on slides in this talk, so make sure that your resolution is set to 720p. You can do that in the bottom right-hand corner of the YouTube Live window. Apart from that, if you've got any questions while you're asking live, feel free to ask those in the chat on the right-hand side of the window. And if you've got questions afterwards, you can ask them on the community site. We'll create a page for that. Okay, so that's the housekeeping out the way. So my name, if you haven't come across me before, my name is Mark Needham. I work in the developer relations team in London. And our guests today are Gavin and Scott from, Gavin and Brett from Quanda. So I think I'm gonna hand over to them because they've got a bit of an intro to themselves at the start of the talk, and they're going to be explaining to us their experiences using GraphQL with Neo4j.
Cool. Hey guys. So I'm Gavin, this is Brett, he's hiding on the side. So I'm one of the co-founders at Quanda, and Brett is one of the, I guess you could call him full stack now. Yeah. Just got his Google Kubernetes certification, which is really cool. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about our company, what we do and why we've chosen Neo4j as our graph database, and why we're using GraphQL as well, most importantly. So that's us. That's me, Gavin. This is Brett. And as a company, we specialize in doing measurable brand experiences. So that's basically taking any kind of physical engagement inside a physical space and then taking the data and then analyzing it so that we can understand how people move in the space, how they interact with the brand, and then how to recontact them in the best way possible. So we have a bucket load of data. To date, we've captured just a little bit over 1.5 million photos and videos. We handle over 250,000 consumer interactions, and we've delivered over 500 events worldwide. And our three pillars basically revolve around engaging with consumers through photo and video experiences, capturing their data using kind of like surveys, registration forms, and now we're doing kind of like people tracking, so tracking movements around an experience space. And then we have a dashboard that we use to analyze all of that data en masse. It's really cool. So we basically chose to use a graph-based database because, funnily enough, we were actually hunting for a really good database to run alongside our GraphQL API that we've been building for the last couple of months. So a couple of months, 6 months. And been doing about a year's worth of research into how best to deliver the information that we want. The one thing that we really wanted from Neo4j, or from our backend, is to allow everyone to be able to explore data. So, you know, a designer can look at a database and actually see something that looks really interesting and be able to build a really cool visual based on that. And also business people can actually look at the data and turn around and say, hey, like this looks like a really interesting cluster of people. Maybe we should look into that a bit deeper. So that's one of the things that we really wanted. So we needed some kind of business intelligence kind of front end or dashboard to push data into. And we also wanted to see visual context into the data that we get as well. So what we found interesting was that the Neo4j browser was epic at doing that because you could suddenly actually deliver this really awesome experience to everybody, and they could actually see what the individual data points, but also the context that surrounds that as well. And we just got access to Bloom, which is pretty awesome for us to see. So yeah, I'm just going to switch back to my camera if I can.
So Gavin, just to recap, so you come, so you were GraphQL first, and then Neo4j after, already deciding you were going to do GraphQL stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually a weird thing because we weren't looking for a graph database.
Yeah.
we were getting so frustrated with trying to fit like Postgres and MySQL and MongoDB and databases into like a graph API, which is sounds quite new. I just had a Google. I was like, what's the best database for a GraphQL-based API? And I misspelled something. It's like cavern of like information suddenly opened up in front of me, and suddenly it was like, wow, actually, this is something different.
And so, can you give like so for those who are not familiar with GraphQL, can you give like a crash course, beginner's introduction to like what is that?
Okay, so traditionally you would have an API for your database, and normally that would be what you would call a RESTful API. So you make a request to a web link. To put it in layman's terms, you would have no concept of what information was going to come back other than through the documentation, and then you can then traditionally say what information you wanted to get back. So you can structure the data that you got in return for your query. So GraphQL kind of solves that by allowing developers to say, I want this specific bit of information from my specific request, and then it allows that developer on the front end to shape that information. So normally you'd have to make like 10 round trips to get a list of products to make a request a list endpoint, and then to get detail on that product, you then have to go to the product endpoint. But with GraphQL, you don't have to do that.
Okay, and so were you replacing a REST-based API with GraphQL, or did you just start straight from GraphQL?
Replacing an API. So we took a massive look at our existing product and just said, you know what? How do we make this really developer friendly? And we felt that REST just wasn't quite cutting it for us at the time.
Okay. Cool. All right, so I guess the plan now is to kind of show people a little bit of how would they be able to reproduce like doing this type of thing. Yeah.
So Neo4j or Neo4j have got this really cool thing called grandstack.
I'll share that in the link in the chat as well.
Oh yeah. And grandstack will basically let you set up a GraphQL API using Node, Neo4j, and GraphQL as well with Apollo. Really like that, but we like TypeScript because it's strongly typed. So we're going to show you how to do that now.
Cool.
Let's just switch the screen over.
Cool. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions about anything that Gavin and I guess Brett are showing, feel free to ask on the live chat, and I will ask them the questions. Cool. So what are we looking at right now? Maybe you can give it.
So you're seeing my terminal. I always start with my product from terminal, obviously, and you're looking at the Neo4j desktop application. I've already created a graph database locally as part of a test, but we're going to create a new one here on the side. So I'm going to click on here and create a new local graph. I'm going to reset the password to let me in, and then hit create. Cool. So that's our graph database being added now. And the next thing that we need to do is actually start creating our project. So if I make a new project, folder called directory Neo4j 2019. 2019. Cool. We use Visual Studio Code for a lot of our stuff, so I'm going to start with that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just set up the base of my project. So these are things like my TypeScript config file, my tslint file, so that it automatically detects errors inside my TypeScript, and also install all of my dependencies as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to copy and paste a lot of stuff into Visual Studio just for speed. But I've set up a separate repository on GitHub for everyone to have access to. It's open, so you can download it. Cool.
I guess we haven't yet mentioned like what are we going to build?
So we're going to build a really simple product API. it's going to
be like will be like something similar to what you built for Quanda. Is that your thinking, or is it?
No. I think our thing is a bit too complex.
Okay, cool.
So we're going to build something super simple that anyone can kind of pick up. And I guess the point of it is to showcase the different types of ways that you can build a really quick API, so you can prototype something really quick, and then for you to be able to see like how you can extend that API to do something a lot more complex, and that's something that you can't really do at the moment. So you'll see here my tsconfig and tslint. Tsconfig, for those of you who don't know TypeScript, basically tells the TypeScript compiler how to compile TypeScript into JavaScript. So TypeScript is kind of like a transpiler, I guess. So you write your code in TypeScript, so it's strongly typed. TypeScript then converts that code into JavaScript, and then you can then run that code on any node-based server. So that's those two bits done. And then I'm going to actually initialize my project as well. So if we go to terminal, and for all intents and purposes, this is a purely like a node-based project as well. So I've set up a project similar to the way that I would normally do. Yep. Just accept all the defaults. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Cool. And then I've got my package.json. I'm going to change the main to be source/index.ts. 9 times out of 10, this doesn't really do anything. I don't think it does, but I guess it's good practice to kind of set that. So the next thing that I want to do is install all of my npm dependencies. So in here, I've got Apollo Boost, which is the Apollo framework for GraphQL. It's a really simple one that they've got that allows you to quickly bootstrap an Apollo API. I've got Apollo cache in memory, which will basically cache any GraphQL requests. Apollo client, Apollo link HTTP, and Apollo server and Server Express. And these are all things that we'll basically use to run Apollo. I've got Express, which is not required, but I like to have my own like backend like Express servers that I can control. I've also got .env that will allow me to store my my credentials for my database inside a .env file. GraphQL tag and GraphQL tools are mainly the GraphQL dependencies. And obviously I've got Neo4j driver and Neo4j GraphQL JS as well. So once that's installed, has anyone got any questions?
Let me check. I think we're good so far.
Cool, awesome. So once those are finished installing, the next thing that I want to do is actually set up my development dependencies. So these are things like Prettier. Prettier is pretty cool because it'll basically take all my code in Visual Studio Code and automatically clean it up for me, so that it abides by the tslint rules. And then I've got another set of dependencies for like just building the project, and I've got TypeScript as well. So these all save inside my dev dependencies, which is pretty cool. So whilst that's being set up, I'm actually going to start creating a couple of folders as well. So I want to make my source and my build folder. So let's make those here. Source is where all my code is going to go, and build is where my target JavaScript is going to end up kind of living. I'm also going to add a couple of scripts in here as well. So these are things that will let me start my server. It'll let me start my dev server, as well as run linters and things like that as well. So I'm going to stick those in there as well. Cool. So that's that bit done. So now that's in a good place. The next thing to do is to create my .env file. And this will basically have all of my configuration for my application. So in here, I've got my Neo4j underscore URI, and that's going to bolts, come on, slash localhost port 7687. Cool. I also need to set up my username, so Neo4j underscore user equals Neo4j. Oh. Also need to set up my password, Neo4j underscore password. Equals to me. And then I also need to set up my GraphQL listen port and my GraphQL URI. I'm just going to paste those in because I want to do this real quick. Cool. Any crazy questions so far?
Yeah, good so far.
Awesome. All right. So the next thing that I want to do is actually start to build out my API. So the first thing that I'm going to need is my index.ts. This is where my application is going to live. I'm going to need my schema.graphql. This is where I'm going to store my GraphQL schema. And I'm also going to need something to load in my GraphQL schema. So TypeScript and JavaScript won't natively load up the GraphQL file. You need to tell it where it is and how to load it and things like that. So I'm going to write some code to pull that in. Cool. So we'll start off with the GraphQL schema TypeScript file. So what we're going to do is import fs as fs, and now basically read files from my file system. I'm going to import path from path. And I've just realized that I think I'm writing in Python. There you go. Cool. So from this file, I'm going to export my typedefs, which will be loaded from my GraphQL file. Equals fs dot. This is not kind of like the nice thing about TypeScript. And one thing that attracted me to it in the first place was that actually you can get a lot of auto-completion from the TypeScript definition files. Schema GraphQL. Cool. And then I'm also going to do toString to make sure that it's a UTF-8 string as well. Okay. Cool. So hit save, and Prettier should do its thing, or it shouldn't. No, it hasn't. That's fine. Cool. Yeah, it's done it. Wicked. So now that's done. I feel like there's something wrong here. No, that's fine. No, that's okay. Okay. Cool. So now I've got my GraphQL schema. That all looks fine. The next thing I want to do is actually start populating my index.TypeScript file. So the first thing that I want to do is actually get my .environment stuff loaded in. So I'm going to do import.env from .env, .env.config. So that's perfect. The next thing I want to do is actually make sure that my port can be picked up. So const port equals number. Some of these things might look really weird for anyone who's used to writing in either JavaScript or Flow. So everything is strongly typed in TypeScript, as I mentioned. So if you don't give something a type, the TypeScript lints will complain about it, which isn't what you want. Cool. This AT-AT thing is really important because at the end of this, we're going to deploy everything to Google Cloud Platform. And Google Cloud Platform only listens to port AT-AT when you deploy it. Otherwise, you'll end up staring at a white page for hours. Brett's shaking his head at me because I feel like that was just the problem that I just had. So the next thing that we want to do is actually set up a logger. So a big thing about TypeScript is it doesn't look like console.log. So what we're going to do is import Winston from. Doesn't look like I've installed Winston either. npm install. And also that's dev. We also want Google Cloud logging Winston. And the Google Cloud logging Winston thing will basically let you log stuff out to Stackdriver on Google Cloud. So you don't end up polluting the logs with just like loads of random console logs, which isn't really what you want. I'll tell you what, I'm going to import out here as well. Import Winston. Cool. Logger equals Winston. Create logger. And we're going to set the transports as well. So this will basically tell Winston where you want it to log to. So Winston.transports. So I'm going to log everything out to the console. Cool. And what we're also going to do is, if it's in production, we actually want it to log not just to the console, but to Stackdriver as well. So process.env.is production logger.add new logging Winston. Cool. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is obviously set up our Neo4j driver. So const driver equals Neo4j. We haven't imported that yet. So we'll do import v1 as Neo4j from Neo4j-driver. Cool. There we go. Cool. So we need the URL. So we've got process.env.neo4j_uri, or because it needs to be a string of some kind, alt:// call host ports 7687. Cool. Neo4j.auth.basic. So this will basically let me log into Neo4j. Actually, just going to copy these two lines over to here to make life easy. And then that sets our username and password for Neo4j. The last couple of things that we need to do is set up Apollo server. So Apollo server is effectively a piece of middleware that sits on Node that will intercept anything going to the GraphQL endpoint and process it through Apollo. And I need to import that as well. So that comes from Express. Other tutorials will actually tell you to import just Apollo server. You can do that if you don't want to control Express, but I'm going to set up my own Express server as part of this as well. So what you want to do is pass in a context, and this will basically send in this context to every single GraphQL resolver inside your server once you go to create new resolvers. And this is pretty handy if you want to inject things like services. So I need to do things like inject the driver and I also need to inject the request, the stuff that comes in through Express's request property too. So it doesn't do that for you automatically. And I use the spread operator to pass in all the request variables as well. Next thing to do is to add introspection. So one of the things that tripped me out when I was playing around with the new version of Apollo server is that introspection is actually disabled by default on production. So when I went to use my local Apollo playground, it wasn't working. So you need to make sure that's set to true, unless you want to restrict people from accessing or traversing your API to understand how it works in production. The last thing that I want to do is inject the schema. So that's that done. That's moaning about something. Can't find it. I remember. I haven't got a schema. I haven't. Cool. So do you remember that file that I told you to create a while ago? We need to import that as well. So we need to import type defs from /GraphQL Schema. Cool. Then we need to cut schema equals make augmented. So there's a few things that are weird here. So normally you would use make executable schema as part of Apollo framework. But Neo4j actually provides you with a make augmented schema method. This is where all the magic happens. It's pretty cool. You get a lot of stuff for free. So what you can do with this is actually say what types you want, and the make augmented schema method will augment the schema with pre-made resolvers for the objects that you want inside your GraphQL database. It's pretty awesome, I'm not gonna lie. So we're gonna import this. And it comes from Neo4j GraphQL.js. Cool. And then that schema now exists inside here. So what we now need to do is set up our Express app. So const app equals Express. Obviously, you need to import that as well. Cool. There's an error up here, but we're going to get back to that in a minute. App.use. You're going to need this cause plugin for Node if you don't have it already. Otherwise, you're going to be staring at your front end for about 4 hours trying to work out why no data is coming in. So npm install -1, let's save cause, and I feel like it has some some strong typing on there as well. Import cause from front. I've already added this in actually. Cool. Next thing that we need to do is make sure that we add a root so that our root URL, so our / URL actually returns something. Otherwise, App Engine will probably moan and not display what you want. So it always needs to return 200 status, and ideally it needs some data in response to that. Okay. Cool. And just out of force of habit, I like to have this /health Z endpoint on there as well. Request response. Cool. Response.status. It's 200. Literally about to type 200. Send status. Okay. Cool. And finally, we want our server to apply the Apollo middleware, or we want our Apollo server to apply the middleware to Express. And now, app.listen, which is what we set earlier. I want it to listen to 0.0.0.0. And lastly, I'm gonna tell Winston, my favorite friend, that the GraphQL API is ready at 0.0.0.0 port. And you'll see why this is handy in a minute. Put that right, Brett?
Mm-hmm. No.
No.
Put a Q.
Oh, every time. Long day. Cool. Right. And then the last thing the second to last thing we need to do is add our product. So we're only going to add one type for now, just to test it. Cool. So this is how we create objects in GraphQL, and this is how we store data and define how that information gets stored in whatever backend that we've got. So to start with, I'm going to give it an ID. Type can basically be anything you want. I call it product. And you can use types with other things as well. So you can actually create relationships between different types using GraphQL, which is really cool. I'm going to give it a name, and it's going to be a type of string. So string is I think it's a Scala type or object type. I can't remember what they are, but it's a type that you can have within GraphQL. So and you can also add comments, which is really nice. So in GraphQL, I can say like this is a product, and then I can also add comments for properties as well. So I'm going to just use single quotes for this. So, right. Well, that's right. That's right. Products ID. And then we've got products name. So the nice thing about GraphQL is that you get a lot of stuff for free. It's pretty cool. So these comments that I've written up here, do you know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what that's. It's pretty cool. So hopefully this doesn't blow up in my face. If I run npm run start dev. Oh yeah, it's that thing that I said that I was going to go back to. Cool. So the one thing that's really frustrating about TypeScript is that everything has to have a type, as I mentioned before. Even the packages that you import from external libraries. So unfortunately, the Neo4j GraphQL JS library doesn't have any type definitions. I've got some here, so I'm going to copy them over, and I will probably submit them to the strongly typed repository as well. So I'm just going to paste them in here. These have been automatically generated. You'll see it just basically, it takes the JavaScript from the module that you want to describe, and it'll automatically generate this stuff for you, which is pretty cool. So now, this, I'm going to clear my thing. Won't explode in my face, I hope. No! What have I done? Make augmented schema. Must provide directives. This. I see what's happened here. I think my TS config It's slightly messed up. Let's quickly change this. Options, JSON cannot be specified with option declaration TS. You gonna work? No! What have I done? What have I done, Brett? Broken something. Hold on. Problem with live coding, isn't it?
Will says you're missing type defs into make augmented schema.
Yeah, I am. I'm pretty sure I copied them over. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, so some people are asking about the time that was spent setting up the environment, but like this is actually the purpose of this meetup, was to just show you like how would you go about it. Like that's the intention of it. If you just want to see like how you do the GraphQL stuff, Will has written a lot of documentation already. So if you prefer to follow like that, then that's fine.
Yeah.
We can share you. I can paste that documentation. But this talk in particular was around like how would you do it from scratch, and like have somebody who knows how to do it take you through the process. Equally, maybe that's not the way you prefer to learn, and then you can go and read something that tells you the same thing.
Exactly. Well, luckily, here's one I made earlier.
But yeah, I guess so, like how much of the setup stuff, like that would be presumably that would be reasonably similar in any like JavaScript project, even if it wasn't specifically TypeScript. I don't know. Was there more that you set up for?
Yes.
TypeScript, or what would you say?
For our API, there was a lot more setup, I guess. So let me bring my camera back quickly. So yeah, for our API, there was a lot more setup involved. So we have a lot of dependencies around like logging and monitoring and things like that. The grandstack framework gives you all of this. So I kind of wanted to show everyone like why the grandstack framework is set up in this specific way. I found when I was learning that I was breaking a lot of stuff and not really understanding what was broken. Or there was a dependency that was being updated that, was a bit, made everything blow up. So, yeah. But once it's set up, you can clone this repo and you can just kind of get started straight away. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do, maybe what we can continue from now is just like maybe show like something going through end to end. So like show something that the grandstack simplified for you. Maybe we can just look at one example all the way through.
Sure. Cool. All right. So here is an example of the project that we set up. So here's one that we made earlier.
Before you do that, we've got a question. So if someone is a Python, like more familiar with Python, the question is, why would you not do this in Python with Flask? And I guess you probably, I'll let you answer.
You could do. I think that's the nice thing about GraphQL is that it almost like doesn't matter what language that you use. The GraphQL schema is the thing that makes your API portable between languages. So you could use Flask, and if you're in .NET, you could use, it's called Hot Chocolate. It's really weird. There are loads of frameworks for different languages that you can use. We actually evaluated everything. So we looked at building GraphQL API in Python. We looked at it in Java, in Kotlin. We even looked at it in Swift as well. And this was just the best because it felt like it was easy to build it in JavaScript because it was like it's almost like a first-class citizen.
Yeah.
So we felt like we could move faster with this, and we wouldn't have like weird dependencies where people would just abandon a project and we'd never see them again.
So would you like, how would you, had a question. Is JavaScript, TypeScript, is that like your predominant language in your company, or did you learn it so that you could use this stack? Yeah, I guess that's the question.
I guess both. So yeah, like we do JavaScript a lot, but there are some problems with it. So from my perspective, we'd like to have a strongly typed language because it means that anyone can kind of come in and just understand how everything works. They have to guess and wait for things to blow up in their faces. But we really like the flexibility of JavaScript.
Yeah.
We figured we know Node already. TypeScript is just almost like a layer on top of that. And GraphQL is almost like the perfect way to get data out to people. Yeah,
and I mean, as my understanding, the GraphQL like Neo4j integration, the most, I guess, the best, the most complete version is in the world of JavaScript. But then there is also like a server-side plugin that you could use if you were using a different language, and so then you would just be doing GraphQL queries directly to the Neo4j server. So you'd kind of, I guess it's a little bit more coupled with the database than what you're able to do in your example, where you've got the sort of application server sitting in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, you can do the same stuff in any other database, but it's just easier to do it with this. I'll show you in a minute how freaking awesome this thing is, and what you actually get for free from it, because it meant that we could build our API in half the time compared to if we were to build it in a completely different language.
Yeah. Cool. Should we go back to the example again then?
Yeah. So as you can see here, I've magically written all this code, and I've got my schema GraphQL file. And as you can see, I've got my product, I've got my colors associated with that product, I've got my features, and then I've got my category. And then I've got a custom query, which I'll show you shortly.
Can you just do like a maybe 30-second explanation of the syntax that's going on there? So you've already explained like in the first example, like ID and string, and what about like feature?
So as I mentioned before, you've got your comment and you've got your types, and then inside here you define your properties. It might look weird, but it looks like JavaScript, but it's not, and it looks like JSON, but it's not. This is the GQL, I think. It's like a graph query language. But you can see some really weird stuff going on here. So if you've played around with GraphQL before, these are called directives. And directives let you add sugar on top of your GraphQL schema. So these are actually functions that get executed in the background. And it's not specific to JavaScript. This will work with like Python or .NET or whatever. It's just the implementation is slightly different. But these ones are very specific to grandstack. So I can basically add relationships between my objects. So here I've got a features property with an array of features. And then in here, I define how that will work within Neo4j. And what's really amazing about this is that I can actually execute Cypher without writing any code. So if you're more into the querying side of Neo4j rather than the kind of like API side or the backend side, and you just want to test an API or build something really quick, you can write your queries using your knowledge of Neo4j, and you can expose it in your API really easily. So this is just basically finding products. So this represents the current product. It's finding products that have the same feature as the current product. And then I'm checking to see, I'm removing anything that's less than about roughly 30% of the price of the product that I picked. And then I'm counting the number of relationships between the features, and then marking, like calling that relevancy. So how relevant these other products are to the product that I'm looking at. And I've got other things like when the product is released and counting the number of, so basically collecting all of the features that are inside there as well. And they're return products, and that gives me similar products to the one I'm looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's good. And can we have a quick look at like feature or categories so we can see how they work?
Yeah, so features, similar things. So in the feature, I've got a key and a value. So this might be, I'm describing mobile phone handsets here. So a key might be storage type, and the value would be the amount of storage that's available for that handset. And then again, I've got a reverse link back into the products that might be related to a specific feature. And you see the single direction, it'll basically tell you which way the arrow is pointing in, the equivalent for Neo4j to do that. And then down here is a more complex query. So we want to see whether we can add our own like query type to this, which is, it wasn't in the documentation, but we thought we'd give it a go. And it turns out you can create your own queries and have them translate back down to Cypher queries, which is really cool. And this is just a basic regex one that will let you put in a product name and just do kind of like a fuzzy search on that to return the product.
Question for you: the type names, they equivalent to Neo4j labels? That's the question.
Oh, I lost you, Mark.
So the types, so feature, category, are they mapping to Neo4j labels?
Yeah, they are actually. I can show you the actual database, which is here. Oh, my box is freaking out. So if we open up the Neo4j browser, hopefully I haven't broken my database. Looks like I might have. Here we go, cool. So those basically translate to something like, oh God, let's use this. Something like this. So I've got like my rear camera feature like resolution. This maps to a Neo4j vertex, yeah, or a node inside Neo4j. So these map to nodes, and then the relationships map to the relationships in Neo4j.
Cool. Okay.
Cool. So what you get out of that is this. So if you've never seen a GraphQL API before, this is probably the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen. You get a really cool console to execute your queries. Get all your queries lovingly mapped out for you here. You also get the documentation, which you lovingly wrote out as comments, available to all developers to play around with, as well as an understanding of every single property, what type they are, and you can also describe them as well in your comments, which is really nice. So if I wanted to get a list of products, which I've already populated, run the query, and I get the IDs back, which is what I asked for. But if I wanted to get the name back as well, I can do that. And if I wanted to get similar products, there you go. And you can do that too. Pretty cool. And if I wanted to create a product as well, I have my mutations. So in GraphQL, you kind of like don't have like post, get, patch, all those standard HTTP request types. You have these things called mutations and queries, and mutations that you do things to objects. So as you can see in here, I've got like a create product mutation, and that lets me create products.
So those things generated for you as well?
Yeah, like I didn't have to do anything for this. It's like it's amazing. You can replace these as well. So what I tend to do is actually create my objects. I'll design my API by defining my types and the relationships, and I'll deploy it somewhere. And then once I've deployed it, I'll give everyone access to it so they can have a play. And then in the background, I'm actually replacing all of these mutations with my own. Some of them will break because they'll be different, but the point is to get the data inside Neo4j. Oh. I've broken something here. Oh, and you also get auto completion as well. So as you can see there, I actually broke the API. So if I do create product, ID, name, test product.
So this is going to go and put it in the database if you run this mutation?
Yeah. It's real time as well. So if I set the price to like 1,000, and then we'll get back the ID and the name as well. Cool. That's it. I've got it inside the database. I can retrieve that pretty easily by going into here and again into product. Lets me set the ID. So I got my product here, and then if I go into Neo4j, I can do this, match product. There it is.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, I can't tell you how much this is sped things up. It's pretty cool.
And so who do you like, who is your consumer of this API that you created? Your GraphQL API. Who's the user of that?
Mark, I lost you then. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I was just saying, so this GraphQL API you've created, who consumes that? Like, who's the user?
For this specific one, anyone. So if you can integrate this into a mobile app, so I can hand it to a mobile app developer now, and they can go ahead and actually start playing around with it.
Okay.
You obviously want to secure it as well, so you can add things like directives to secure individual queries and types and stuff.
Yeah. Do you have one where you've done that already somewhere?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure if I'll be able to.
Or if not, we can just look at the documentation for what you need to do. It's fine as well.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of, do you mean deploying it, Mark?
No, just no, just anything. Just like, what's the next step you do after you've done that was where any particular place I was going with question.
That's right. So once this is done, you want to deploy it to Google Cloud or Azure or AWS, and then that makes it publicly accessible to everyone. I don't know if we'll have enough time to go through that.
Yeah, we'll probably skip it, but like, what would be, maybe you can just explain what the steps would be.
Yeah, so what I would do is go through to Google Cloud Console and set up an App Engine project. So I'll go and create a new project, set up App Engine, and I would then just add the app.yaml file to my project that will then allow me to deploy it to Google Cloud. And once that's up there, and everyone has access to it, Neo4j actually has this really cool thing on the Google Cloud Marketplace. So if you wanted to quickly set up a cloud-based instance for Neo4j, you can do that quite quick. So if I were to go to, I'll do that today. One sec. So Yeah, so I would go to Google Cloud Console, create a new project, and then what I can then do is go into here, look for Neo4j, and then you'll see that there is a casual cluster. There it is. So you get this thing called the Google Cloud Marketplace, and then that lets you quickly just launch a Neo4j enterprise project or instance inside your cloud. It's pretty cool. And then you can connect your application up to that remotely.
Cool. Got a question for you. So it says currently the Neo4j native schema consists of property, existence, and uniqueness. Is GraphQL the best way to define or enforce a richer schema? I guess in your experience.
Yes, absolutely. I think I personally wouldn't use grandstack as it is. I would follow their guidance and set up custom resolvers, and then that will then allow you to enforce the schema.
Okay.
The problem comes when you want to have multiple applications kind of attacking Neo4j, if that makes any sense. So you have 3 or 4 applications connected to the same database. You need to make sure that the logic is consistent from one application to the other.
Okay. Cool. So I guess we're getting reasonably close to the hour. So like, do you have any like sort of summary words of wisdom for anyone? I guess like if people are, I guess they don't necessarily need to repeat like your setup process each time. I guess you only need to do that once or copy it from like one of Will's examples.
Yeah.
At least that's what I do, but I don't know JavaScript very well, so I tend to just clone. I get used to cloning Will's repositories. But yeah, what would be your closing words of advice to people? Like if you let's say, so presumably if you know JavaScript already, this is going to be pretty easy for someone to pick up. What happens if they don't know it? Like, would you suggest this as like an approach for
No, if you don't know JavaScript yet, I think this might be like a step too far.
Okay.
What I would recommend doing actually is using the GraphQL plugin with the Neo4j, because that will give you everything you kind of need without having to learn about Node and like how Apollo engine works and all that kind of stuff. That's a good first step to understanding how GraphQL works as an API. And then I would then start learning Node, because it's quite a big step for someone who hasn't done Node before. Downloading Will's project, obviously, if you're doing JavaScript and Node, and testing that out and having a play. But don't be afraid. It's generally have a play, because I think once you get past that barrier, like the grandstack stuff is a bit like this. It's like this giant bell curve where you're like, oh my god, this is really amazing, this is so cool, and you get to the top and you're like, I need to learn Cypher, and I don't really understand how these dependencies work. And then suddenly you have an epiphany, and then you have this massive downwards thing in terms of stress levels and reward, like you're starting to actually achieve something with it. So yeah, don't be afraid.
Cool. It's a good closing message. I guess I've got one more question for you that just come in while we've been talking. Do you have any thoughts on best practices for schema stitching / delegation when building a GraphQL-based API?
Yeah, if you can do schema stitching, make sure you use Apollo. I've tried to do it with things like, make sure you use Apollo and vanilla JS. I've tried to do it with like Nest.js and like with Kotlin and stuff, and it kind of works. Best thing to do is always to plan it. So like, don't just try and stitch to GraphQL APIs together and kind of expect them to work. You actually need to make sure that when you're writing your resolvers and you have to go back into remote schemas, you have to make sure that you account for things like latency. Recommendation, personally. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hopefully that I think we've answered all the questions that were asked during the talk. We've also shared on the live chat some links to tutorials that Will has written. So if you prefer to read stuff, that's probably a good place to go as well. And Will has links to lots of different resources that you can use on there as well. But I guess we'll wrap up here. So thanks Gavin, for coming to share your experience with us.
Cool.
Next week we're going to be doing back into the world of blockchain, and we're going to have a talk about loading Bitcoin into Neo4j in one day. Seems like a lofty goal, but that's where we're going to live. So yeah, same time again next week. So thanks to everyone for joining, and again thanks to Gavin for presenting.
Cool. Bye. See ya.